Welcome back to another episode of The Update. I've got Saul Klein, John Reilly. Even though it says John Reilly on his, it's actually Saul Klein. Let me switch your
How did
name up,
that
buddy.
happen? Is that John's new computer? He wants to take credit for everything.
Everything.
That is so funny. There we go. And we want to talk to you about how every day feels like a new lawsuit. Yesterday, Rocket just got a lawsuit from, I don't know if it's all the same, but some of the attorneys that are suing are those same attorneys that sued NAR. And those, I'm assuming, guys, this is going to you, are the same or some of the same attorneys that also brought that Zillow lawsuit on RESPA just a few months ago. And RESPA is all of a sudden a big thing because the attorneys found a loophole. What do you guys all think about that?
So RESPA, first of all, gosh, there's so many things to talk about. RESPA's always been a big thing, you know?
But I feel like recently it's becoming the way in to get more money for attorneys.
Well, so all of a sudden, so back when John Reilly and I were active in the real estate industry, and this goes back 50 years, people would do things that later became violations of RESPA, right? So people would give away, I remember title reps would give us things.
I remember.
And mortgage loan officers would give us things. And then escrow companies started buying fax machines for brokers so they could fax the deals in. And then title companies and escrow companies started buying computers for brokerage firms that gave them business. Well, all of this stuff kind of like is RESPA violations, right? Well, then they actually made them visible as RESPA violations. I think what happened is then nobody could think of what was a RESPA violation anymore, but all of a sudden they started thinking of things that could be considered RESPA violations. And all these new cases, they kind of relate to the same thing, huh, John? Like steering and undisclosed referral fees. And before we get into it, as I looked at this, I was thinking today, there's like these four driving forces of the future. And a lot of the things we talk about really don't affect the day-to-day transactions of real estate agents. And, we got real estate agents got other things to worry about besides some of this esoteric kind of stuff. But the more you know about this and the more you can kind of outline the future before it happens, the more successful you'll be in the future. So here are the driving forces: litigation, consolidation, regulation, and legislation. And so those four major areas, litigation, consolidation, regulation, and legislation, are all going to be the driving forces that shape the future of residential real estate sales. And so you mentioned it, Tristan, and John's done some backup and research on a couple of these cases that have to do with RESPA violations, with undisclosed referral fees, with possibly breach of fiduciary duty. And John, why don't you pick up on the latest case that was filed yesterday?
Well, that's the one that Tristan was just talking about, the Rocket case. And it's another class action, and it's filed by the same attorney firm, Hagen and Berman, out of the Northwest. And they're the ones that filed the original moral suit on a national, basis. And so the attorneys there have kind of sharpened their eye on the target being the residential market of real estate brokerage, but also the mortgage side of things as well. And you're going to see more. You'll start to see some of the afterflow cases in other areas, people filing it, and then the consolidation of these suits. Just like with the Armstrong case that we discussed, last week, suddenly it was consolidated with the Taylor case, and then another one coming up. This is fertile area for the antitrust attorneys.
Yeah, just to give a little background on the Morel, didn't that finally morph into Sitzer-Burnett?
Yes, it did, but it's still independent of Sitzer, but it's the same basis, for it. And Sitzer-Burnett was limited basically to Missouri type of situations. Morrill was a more national in scope and touching so many more MLSs and agents.
All right. So what do you think is next? Because we've got Zillow being sued for the exact same thing, RESPA violation, right? And dude, when I read both, I felt like I was reading a duplicate, right? Rockets and Zillow's exact same thing. Like, hey, you're steering and you're telling the buyer where to get the loan, and you're not giving him an opportunity to go and look at other lenders.
Well,
Do
I
you
think
think?
two.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, and I think too, a big part of that then is if the brokers did send the prospective borrower to Zillow or to Rocket, they got rewarded.
Oh yeah.
That's the key. That's the RESPA
Well,
piece, right?
yeah, the 35% fee back to Rocket, right?
They
Yeah,
get
there's a
something back, or they
there's
get better leads, or which is this idea of something that's settlement connected business back to the referrer without the disclosure that they were getting paid for it. It's paid, right, in some way.
yeah,
Yeah,
that is.
I think it involved the Premier Agent and the Flex, program, mostly like with Zillow, and now with Rocket, it referred to their own referral program, and with Rocket, you would get a lower amount. Uh, there would be of if you referred to Rocket Mortgage. If not, if you didn't refer, then you would, get a less advantage type of referral.
Okay. So then
So that
what
was
is
the
this?
quid pro quo, of referring it.
What
And
what does this mean for what does this mean for the real estate world when we're looking at Zillow and Rocket getting sued? How does that touch the real estate agent?
well, it's going to be pretty important, I think, for the brokerage company to have an office policy that addresses the issue. Otherwise, they and the agent are going to be, dragged into the suits. It'll have a much wider web. So agents have to listen to what their broker's policy is in this regard, and the broker better have a policy because they're the ones that are going to be, on the hook in the transactions in which they're participating in a transaction where there's steering of business. And under RESPA, there is this: if it's a broker to broker referral, then there's an exemption under RESPA. But one of the questions raised in one of the suits is, hey, is Zillow really a broker in this capacity as opposed to being more just a referral and not a
Hmm.
broker itself, and maybe not qualify for that broker to broker exemption under RESPA? That'll be the
So I
big
Uh,
guess,
legal question that's going to be
yeah,
fought.
and maybe Tristan, the question, one of the questions is how far down does the liability spread,
yeah, that's a big
right?
question. Like, what about those agents that did get the 35%, or sorry, we're giving the 35% referral to Rocket? Are they also responsible? And will Rocket be like, don't worry about it, we got you guys, we'll cover you? What does this all look like? I don't know. It's it's an interesting situation, man.
Yeah, so we don't know. And that's why John mentions brokers need to have a policy in place. And
What would
for
the John, what would the policy be in place, or what would it sound like to protect the broker and help the agents out? What would that look
Well,
like in your head?
yeah, you'd have to have disclosure of a referral fee that's involved in a transaction, right? generally now the agent will be asked by the client, well, how do I pay for this? Well, you can get a loan. As a matter of fact, here, if you get a loan from our lender, you'd be able to have probably negotiate a better price. And that's the tie-in. And to do it without disclosing it, then that brings in the fiduciary claim of not acting in the best interest of the client, and basically hiding from him the fact that he could get a more beneficial type of loan going to a different lender. So that's where the agent gets tied in, not talking about that advantage to the client. That would be the non-disclosure, the breach of fiduciary duty. But the point I was making is, that's pretty far down the line, but going after the brokerage company itself, I think is what the attorneys are really going to be targeting, because they're the ones that have the ultimate responsibility under the licensing law for supervising their agents.
Well,
I think it might be good practice for brokers to pay close attention to these kinds of programs so that they know what potential liability they might end up with. And maybe you don't participate. I'm not suggesting that you boycott anybody, but maybe you think very carefully about how you're going to allow the agents that work for you to participate in these types of referral programs.
Okay, on that, because I know we have on our agenda to talk about Compass and what they're building. But before we get there, doesn't this open up the door for large brokerages to also get sued on this exact thing? Because look at what these larger brokerages have also done when they partner with either more large mortgage companies or title. They've got their own title, or they've got their own escrow, or I don't know. But it seems like this is just the door opening bigger for RESPA violations all across the board for all the big ones: Keller Williams, Compass, Berkshire Hathaway, everybody. And it's just opening. I think it's just opening. But what do you guys think of that?
Yeah, I think you're right. It is kind of just opening. People need to really pay attention to this. While brokerage firms often generate revenue that makes them profitable from
Yeah,
ancillary businesses,
a lot.
that, maybe we're seeing, well, no doubt we're seeing more interest in this from a regulator's perspective,
Hmm.
from a legislative possibly perspective, from a litigation perspective. So I kind of these 4 points to start paying more attention to it, because it could dramatically shape the real estate brokerage of the future, because these firms often do own ancillary or have interest in ancillary. So, it goes back to, I remember, whether it was right or wrong or whether it made a difference or not, I can't tell you. But whenever an agent made a referral of anything, the plumber, kind of this old rule of thumb was make sure you always make 3 referrals, right? So
Yeah.
whether or not you were even compensated. So maybe it's time to relook at that and see if there's any value to that. And, if I owned a brokerage, an active brokerage today, I would be speaking to my attorney, and I would make sure I spoke to my errors and omission insurance provider as well.
Mm, yeah. That's so true, man. It's getting crazy, guys. Okay, on the Compass side, what are Compass and Now Anywhere? What are they building? Because you both brought up to me a new agent operating system, a first end-to-end brokerage, almost like what Zillow wants to do, right? The end-to-end app. What are we seeing, or what have you heard?
Well, I think I heard that Robert Refkin, basically announced where the Compass firm is headed now that they're amassed 320,000 agents across the country, and he's pulling all of his stuff together, building their own stack to help agents search and then monitor transactions. I mean, we've had, people with their own CRMs, but they've kind of been fragmented and used different vendors. He's putting it all into one, and that's what he's now labeled. I think in some announcement he did a week or so ago, in which he talked about this system that they're using, and it's going to be for agents to basically have more total control. And in a way, it's kind of like an add-on to the MLS. It basically is going to be one which uses as a data supplier the MLS, but on top of it, they have now the whole system is the technology is being developed into this AOS system.
It's interesting because what they could do, since now they're going to have 320,000 plus agents, they're going to have all these offices, and with that, they're going to get the broker feeds, so they can just feed them into the tech that they built. So the algorithm then collects all of that data. Because I mean, between all of the offices, come on, guys, they've covered. It's like Redfin; they're covered the whole thing. And if it's all feeding into one, then they've got their own backend system that now is running AI and can deliver whatever they want, and they have the money to build it. So it makes complete sense, John, what you're saying. Now, what are some legal problems that you see, Saul, because you run an MLS?
Well, so the first thing I want to say is that this is not new. This idea of building tools for the agents that work for you.
True.
And in 2008 at point two, what we tried to build, and we sold the company too soon, that's another story, but what we were working on was the operating system for the real estate industry. That's what we called it. And how many large brokerage, household names have said, we're going to build the tech stack for all of our agents, and then it flopped. Or then they couldn't get the agents to use it. Or the agents were protective of the information because they didn't know how long they might stay at that brokerage firm. And so adoption, I don't care how big you are, but getting, it's like we used to kid lovingly that it's like herding cats, getting agents, independent contractors to do all these things that are in the best interest of the brokerage firm, and the broker's got to convince them it's in the best interest of the agent. And I'm not certain that even if you have 320,000 agents that you're necessarily going to get them all to use the technology that you built. Now, having said that, you're right, Tristan. All that, if you could herd all those cats and you could bring all that information in, and you could then had the add edit capability to keep that information updated and fresh. How are you going to get an agent to update things to make sure? Right now, I know AI, you could bring that in and it could go out and it could check statuses, and that might make it a little bit easier. I'm just not certain that that's necessarily going to happen tomorrow.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
One
John.
thought I had as well is that this was once tried recently, actually, with the broker public portal. That whole concept was one in which you're going to amass all of this data from brokerages across the country. But I think there were funding reasons and maybe some governance reasons why the broker public portal was not a great success when it first came out. But that was a system, I believe, that was targeting also having an operating system that would be developed by brokers for brokers.
It actually goes back to some of the ideas we had in 2008, and I think Bob Bemis was involved with that. But I'll throw in a plug for the Broker Public Portal. I think that they've come a long way. I think they're working on
Yep.
some great ideas. I think if you're not familiar with the Broker Public Portal, you ought to go out and take a look at it. And this whole idea of taking a universe of independent contractors and getting them all to use the same tech stack is easier said than done. I think it's easier to
Right.
write the software.
You know why you say that, Saul? Because you have experience. You have experience running an MLS and knowing that the adoption is horrendous for technology. You are so right. Yeah, very, very interesting to see that. All right, let's pivot. You sent me something last, you expanded on it a little bit more than the original one, which was, let me grab it, Optimal Blue. I'd never even heard of this. You mentioned Optimal Blue responded to a class action lawsuit alleging mortgage price fixing, which is a pretty serious thing. Can you guys fill me into that? Because I wasn't aware of this whole thing.
I'll do a little bit and then John can jump in. Optimal Blue is a pricing engine, and it was owned by Black Knight. And when Black Knight sold, you'll love this, Tristan, to ICE, they had to spin off Optimal Blue. And ICE or Black Knight and ICE bought all these pieces to do this cradle to grave thing that we're going to talk about someday. And one of the pieces was Optimal Blue, and they spun that off, but it's a pricing engine. So it's not a marketplace, but it's a pricing engine where people who are in the lending business can go and try to find the most optimal loans for their lending customers. John, did I kind of cover
Mm.
that?
Yeah, no, that's very accurate, and uh, this class action suit is in the very, very early stage, and we haven't seen any of the discovery yet. But I did read the defending set from the CEO, I believe, saying that this looks like they're just trying to copy another antitrust case, which was the real page case, which I think we also discussed last year, which was a conspiracy, had a conspiracy element, to it, of fixing the rental rates in the residential rental market.
Got it. Yep.
And they're
Well,
now trying to apply that to the people supplying the data. But the defendants are just basically saying, "Hey, we're just data providers. There's no conspiracy between one company or another." So, it looks to me like they got
yeah,
a pretty good defense to it.
got it.
Well,
It's like
the
the,
interesting one, Optimal Blue is now owned by what, Constellation,
Right.
yes.
publicly traded company. And this idea of, a matter of fact, Tristan, I watch a lot of the stuff you do. I follow you and watch your videos and things. And one of the things that I've watched you do or speak about lately is prompting AI.
Mm,
And
yes,
so
yes.
I think this is a great one. Go to your favorite large language model, ChatGPT or Claude or whatever one for all the people listening and watching this, and ask,
Okay.
what is Optimal Blue? Is it a pricing engine or is it a mortgage marketplace? What efficiencies does it bring to the mortgage market? Does it Who pays for those efficiencies? Does this ultimately cost the consumer, or is it an advantage to the lender? These are the kinds of fun questions that
Mm,
that I like to go to AI with and just have a
that,
conversation about it, right?
yeah, because that is actually a really good rabbit hole to go through. It helps you
Yeah.
understand everything. I like that,
You,
Saul. I just
you know,
typed that
I
into
think the
writing.
Department of Justice does the same thing. I, I think they could ask those same questions and get the response from their AI. From the,
But
Listen,
but
I
we've
think,
got a whole bunch of AI attorneys, okay?
Yeah, and like, but like anything with AI, the more you know about the subject, the better your
right?
prompts are going to be.
Yeah, damn.
Right, it is a rabbit hole for sure.
All right, guys. Last thing, I want to know what you're seeing around the corner. Like, what's popping up that maybe we weren't really paying attention to that we should? Something that's important that could be maybe a detriment to the real estate world, or maybe even the opposite is something amazing. Are you guys seeing anything along those lines?
Well, this is old, but it's gained prominence lately, and that is there's a direct assault on private property rights. And private property rights, in my mind, are what made this country great. The idea that people could own a stake in the country. And I think people that own part of the, that own real estate, they pay more attention. They got a stake in the system. So I'm a big advocate, always have been, along with NAR and my local and state association, just a huge advocate of private property rights. And I believe that homes should be owned by people and that it's not a commodity that the government should run and control, like we're seeing, at least the kind of comments we're seeing coming out of New York City.
Yeah,
So I think that there is a direct assault, and we see it in California, Tristan, with
yeah,
the
we do.
pro-tenant legislation and how hard it is
Crazy.
to manage property today with all of the different disclosures and the things you have to do, and you got to pay tenants to move, and the government even wants to tell us who we can sell our property to and who we can't. So I think there's a direct assault on private property rights, and that would directly
Good
affect
say.
those people that list and sell real estate.
I agree with you there. I do see it. It's always crazy to see that. I feel like it's very one-sided right now. It's interesting. John, anything?
Oh, mainly I keep hearing the argument that the MLS is dead, and that's a fallacy. We always need the MLS. It's a matter of how it's structured, how it can work with the industry, but it's the central policing agency for the value of the data. And
Yeah.
so,
Do you think though, I think what people mean, the people that I think what they're trying to say, and this is assuming that they understand, right? But what they're trying to say is maybe the MLS becomes less influential than it has been just over the last few years. Is that something that's going to happen? Or do you think they'll still maintain the same type of influence?
So I don't know. It depends on how you find it. As Bill Clinton, depends how you define it. That's what is, right? But depends how you
That's
define
funny.
influence. But in my mind, the data, as John said, the policing of the data, the accuracy of the data, providing the single source of truth of what's available in good markets and bad markets. I think MLS has become more influential in the long run, and that there are going to be better ways to monetize. MLSs are subscription services, but I
Yep.
believe that the data has huge value, and that, like the internet, like the web today, if you have content, you get paid for it. I think that
True.
that as we look into the future, we're going to see that you're going to get paid for the data that you input into a system. We can call it an MLS. And I think it's still local because what we call certain things and certain traditions that we and customs we have around selling real estate in our market might be different in other markets, but we'll see more opportunities to data share, more opportunities to monetize if the MLSs are run the way what I would say to be correctly. We're going to figure out ways to return those rewards to the people that
Yeah.
provide the data to the system, and we can flip the model, and we can say if you join our MLS, I'm not anyone in particular, but if you join this particular MLS, you'll get paid for the data. And there might be 10 mandatory fields, but if you put 100 fields in, it makes the property more searchable,
Yep.
and maybe you can get paid for, well, 10 mandatory fields, but if you put in 20, you'll get paid for it. So there's all kinds of ways to do this as we look at the future of MLS.
How do you think we launch this so that we can get it going? Because I know you guys have
Ah,
had this idea for years, and I think you've only refined it over the years. So how do we finally launch this thing, guys?
So I would say good, there's a company called Realty Feed. That's a company we work with that is works everything is Amazon Web Services, where we're looking
Okay.
at API first, where the technology is there to tell us what's happening with the data. You know, there's this whole gray data marketplace where millions and millions of dollars are being bled out of the
Yep.
industry. But I think we're getting close to the day when the technology will help us be able to figure that out and go to realtyfeed.com. I don't know if that's the URL, but that's where I'd start and just
Okay.
start to learn about API first. Look at RESO, Real Estate Standards Organization, and
Yep.
how valuable standards are.
That's
And
true.
I think the future of MLS is bright. Not bright
Nice.
MLS,
I was
but
about to ask, do you mean bright as in bright MLS? All right, guys. Well, I'll leave you with that. There's a lot. I just feel like we're building up again to a whole new set of lawsuits, which is interesting. We'll see how it goes. So I think people are going to need us even more. So um, stay on it, guys, because I rely on you
you're there.
too.
Great to see you.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, John. Thanks, Saul.
Aloha.
Hello, aloha. That's right. That's right. You're in Hawaii. Love you, brother.